Well, let's get more on what possible response Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook should be producing publicly. We'll bring in the president of Duke's Linden Public Relations. Our guest is Seth Linden. Seth, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
If you were advising Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer, right now, what would you be telling them?
Sure. Well, I think there are a few things, and let me put it through the lens of the fact that our firm works with Fortune 500 organizations, privately held firms, so every entity is different, but there are some rules of the road. First of all, Facebook is late to the game. It should have had a communication from Mark Zuckerberg at this point, and the fact that he has been silent suggests that there's a major issue. Now, I think just to get into a little bit of inside baseball, there are a lot of facts on the ground that we are not privy to. When I go into these situations, for example, and I help firms and my colleagues do, you're dealing with several entities. It's not just communications. You're dealing with legal counsel. You're dealing with compliance. And there may be some very severe debates around the table right now about how do we handle this? What can we say? What can't we say? And there often does become a debate between compliance and communications. Communications wants to get out there, share the message, and legal says, no, hold on a minute, we can't do that yet. The problem in this situation is that Facebook is such a conglomerate, obviously. It has so much international reach. It's a major, major force. It can't afford to be silent. And I personally would say, from the outside view, it's got to get to the game quickly. And even when it does, there's going to be a lot of lingering doubts because, as we know, this is not Facebook's first issue. There is a major credibility problem. Communication should have been on top of it sooner. But I do respect the fact that there is this tension going on right now.
That's interesting, though. You think, as you say, there's a lot of unknowns, that the delay in the response by Zuckerberg could indicate that this is a very tricky problem for Facebook?
One would have to assume. I mean, we might pleasantly find out that there's a rational, reasonable explanation for this issue. But you have to remember, of course, there is a major trust issue at hand here. You have users all over the world, and certainly in the U.S., affected by this. There's a question about, is my information safe? Can I still trust the company? And the very model is at stake. And I think we have all assumed naturally, because Facebook is such a behemoth, that it can get through any problem. But let's remember the fact that we would have had this conversation together 40 years ago on an RCA TV. We would have driven in a GM or Ford car to get there, not a Honda or Toyota. And models do change. And Facebook has to realize that its whole model feasibly is at stake. So it needed to get out there, and it has a credibility issue. One news conference isn't going to solve the problem. It is going to need to run an internal review to assess what happened. But I suspect, and again, I could be wrong because we don't know the facts yet, there's a major issue at stake. It would have to be given the delayed response.
And Brian Acton, obviously a tycoon of the internet, co-founder of WhatsApp, he sold a business to Facebook, but publicly he's saying it's time to disconnect. Does a thing like that carry weight?
I think it does, because it's symbolic of the fact that there is a major frustration with Facebook, and that's why there is a major communications issue at stake. And I do think that if you look at this from your viewer's lens and your lens as well, there's a message here to other companies, whether you're a small business or a large corporation publicly traded. You've got to be accountable. You've got to deal with problems. You've got to take them head on. And I also think, and I don't know if this exercise has been done, and this would be the major issue, have there been meetings internally to say, you know, we've got this political data problem. It's going to come up someday. What's our plan to deal with it? And I don't know that philosophical moment has happened at Facebook, and that may very be the problem here. Companies, whether it's an employee issue, an accountability issue, just a plain old mess up, need to account for those issues, and they need to be thinking about them in advance. And it sounds very philosophical, again, to do that, but you can actually do a lot by thinking about where are weak spots, planning for them in advance. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, good companies do plan for scenarios such as technology breakdowns, natural disasters, and malfeasance. That's what a company like Facebook should be doing, and I don't know that that's occurred, and one would hope that it would occur.
Sheryl Sandberg likes to advise business leaders. She said women in business should lean in. You should run towards the fire. She doesn't seem to be doing much leaning in on this issue.
Well, you've raised a very key point, and that's the ironic part of this. You've got a very dynamic person such as Sheryl Sandberg. You've got a company that changed the way we communicate, and yet it's not communicating proactively, and neither are the principals involved. And Facebook clearly has the forum, whether through media like television or traditional media like newspapers can communicate, or it can use its own very forums to communicate to the general public, investors, etc., and it's not really doing that. And that is part of the problem. And the longer the wait, you say, what's going on? But as I said, I think even if we hear from Mark Zuckerberg this week and he explains the issues at hand, I think it would be appropriate protocol to run a review and say what happened, and to reassure people that their data is safe, because I don't think that question is going to go away anytime soon. And by the way, this is a broader issue for anybody who's offering a free channel, you know, whether we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. I think everybody is questioning, is my data safe? So the model is no doubt, I think, in flux.
Zuckerberg lawmakers in the United States and Britain have said they want to see Zuckerberg, they want to hear him testify. Would you advise him to go to Congress or go to the British Parliament?
Well, this is again where you get a little bit inside baseball. First, you have to obviously talk to compliance and say, should we testify? I think by not testifying, there, at least from a communication standpoint, is definitely, again, a note of evasiveness. But one has to be careful. I covered Washington for years as a reporter, and there is definitely that image of somebody going in, and members of Congress and Parliament, et cetera, love to attack, and it's a great way to score points. So you have to be very prepared. I would say that if he does go to Parliament or to Congress to testify, he will have to be very well messaged, very well prepped, and it has been my observation that that's not a strength of Mark Zuckerberg particularly, to communicate in public forums like this, as brilliant as he is. So he will have to be well prepared. I will tell you, when a crisis occurs, often you bring in the so-called experts, and I'm pleased to say that we're often in that camp. We will go in and prepare people to deliver the message the right way, because you can have all the facts on your side, but if you look nervous, if you look evasive, if you stutter your way through testimony or an interview, you can actually do a lot of damage. And you're moving fast, and I'm sympathetic to the fact that they may just be caught up in a situation that is not their fault. But if you don't communicate those messages the right way, the public turns quickly, and unfortunately we're seeing that right now.
It's interesting you use the expression moving fast, because of course famously Zuckerberg said he wants to move fast and break things. Is it time really to move back from that kind of ad hoc way of approaching things, announcing major acquisitions, for example, without consulting your board, stuff like that?
I believe absolutely yes. I mean, I think, you know, the expression about moving fast and slow at the same time, I think is apt. You have to be able to be thoughtful about what you're doing. And even though you have a new model, the entire social media world is fast moving and instantaneous, you still have to be methodical and thoughtful about the fact that you're serving investors and a public. And when you move too quickly, you make mistakes. And I don't think that's applicable just to a large conglomerate like Facebook. It's true for everyday businesses. One tweet is enough to destroy a reputation today, as we know. Now, you can have second chances, third chances, et cetera, and the rules are being rewritten every day. Certainly, we see what's going on in Washington. But at the end of the day, you've got to be methodical, particularly when you're talking about long-lasting public communications and financial transactions. That's a 101 of public communications and public relations, no doubt.
Seth, great talking to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Our guest has been Seth Linden, President of Dukis Public Relations.